want to come and do your time. You can get used to doing that because you're going to do a whole lot of it.
I regret the fact that I treated my mom so poorly. I regret looking up to the people who I looked up to. You know, these are supposed to be the best years of my life. You know, these teenage years. And, you know, they've been the worst for me. I wasted so much time out of my life. Man, to everybody out there, man, it's not worth it. You don't even need to go this route because, man, all it's going to get you is either locked up or killed. Keep yourself up out of this thing before, you know, before it happened to you.
My name is Diana Pagan. I'm a volunteer at Brooks AIDS Network in Reading, Pennsylvania. I started using drugs when I was approximately 13 years old. I started out early on with alcohol, just experimenting, having a good time, you know, hanging out with my friends and just partying. Slowly but surely it led me to experiment with marijuana, started experimenting with LSD, never really seeing it as a problem. By the time I was 17, I was sticking a needle in my arm, and I knew that that I would never have done that had I not been under the influence of alcohol, and I was devastated. And I sit here HIV positive as a direct result of picking up alcohol, like I said, at 13, leading to marijuana, having unprotected sex, and then sticking needles in my arm by the time I was 17 years old. Again, you know, I thought that those sort of things happened to other people, other kids from other areas, and unfortunately it happened to me. I do believe that had I not made a decision to pick up alcohol when I was 13 years old, I would not be sitting here today telling you that I'm HIV positive. I believe at times it's very effective to put a face to the reality of HIV and alcohol and drugs. And what I tell them is that you make a decision to pick up alcohol or pick up drugs, and becoming HIV positive is a very real possibility, because when they look at me, they know it's real. And I say, if you're sitting here and you think it's not going to happen to you, think again, because I was one of those kids at 13, 14, 15 thinking the bad things were never going to happen to me. So I think it's very effective, instead of having teachers or whomever come in and tell kids, hey, you know, stay away from drugs and alcohol, or this can happen. It's very effective when you bring it real, and they look at me and they say, oh my God, you know, this does happen. But while I was under the influence, I wasn't able to make good decisions in my life. You know, when I was under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of marijuana, I wasn't able to make good decisions. Therefore, I started to engage in behaviors like having unprotected sex. Now, these were with boys I knew, but still, the next day when I was no longer under the influence, I had remorse and thought, you know, I probably shouldn't have done that, or if I was going to do that, maybe I should have protected myself. And again, in reference to using needles, I would have never used needles in my life. I know that because I saw what happened to a family member of mine that became engaged in injectable drug usage. And again, you know, under the influence of alcohol and marijuana, you know, older kids that I was around, older people, thought that it would be cool to introduce these young kids to injectable drugs. And I wasn't able to make good decisions in my life. And that's what occurred for me. I know, had I been clean and sober at that moment, and somebody said, hey, here, try this injectable drug, stick this needle in your arm, I would have said no way, because I said it many times when I was clean and sober.
If I want someone to get high, I just bug them about it and be like, come on, man, just do it, it's cool. You're not going to do it if you don't want to. It's all whether you want to or not. Yeah, friends definitely have an influence. Who you're hanging out with is you're going to do what they're going to do, or you wouldn't be with them in the first place.
I would say a lot of it has to do with your peers. If you don't want to be in trouble, if you don't want to use drugs and alcohol, or engage in any other kind of behavior that's not healthy for you or good for you, whether it be violence or whatever, then you need to hang around and pick friends who are also involved in other extracurricular activities. We have a lot of teenagers that come to Berksaids Network and volunteer and spend their extra time contributing to other people's lives and helping others, and it empowers them. They don't want to self-destruct when they're doing something good for themselves and for others, and they feel like they're making a difference. But I think the number one thing for me that happened for me is, I was a college prep student in junior high, and I began to hang out with the kids who were partying. And as I began to hang out with the kids who were partying, I began to party. So that played a big part with the people that I hung out with, my friends. And I remember my mother saying that to me when I was very young. She's like, Diana, you become who you hang around with. And if you don't want to become bad, as she would say it, which I don't really like to get into good and bad, but that's what my mother would say, she was, don't hang around bad people. But if you hang around bad people, you're going to do bad things.
Yeah, like sometimes after they smoke, they want to have sex or whatever, but I feel that I'm not like that, because like even though I'm high, I respect myself and I still know what I'm doing. She's on the same track I was, and unfortunately haven't been able to make a difference in her life. But, she's hanging around the people, that like to hang on the street corner, smoke the blunts, drink the 40s, and she's right now going nowhere. And that's very sad. So I believe that it's the peers. It's who you hang out with. You really do become who you hang around with.
I got a little nephew out there.
Trying to show love, not guns, to my nephew. He's 2 years old. He about to turn 3. 3 years of his life, he never spent one with me.
You remember in my rap, I wrote, he's 2 years old, he about to turn 3. In 3 years of his life, he never spent one with me. Well, when he was born, I was locked up. When I got out, it took a couple of months to make me fall back into the same people. People, places, and things. You can't hang around the same people, the same things, or the same places, because you're going to fall back into it. Man, that's true, you know what I'm saying? Because I did that. I fell around in the same people, in the same places, same things every day, and slowly but surely I got back into the same things.
The consequences of unprotected sex, along with becoming HIV positive, are a lot of other sexually transmitted diseases, including chlamydia, gonorrhea, genital warts, genital herpes. And you got to understand that a lot of these things like herpes and genital warts you have for life. You have for life. You cannot get rid of it. And they're very painful. It can cause problems with birthing. If a female is infected with herpes or genital warts, it can affect the fetus and things like that. So there's a lot of consequences to having unprotected sex, a lot. I believe that the relationship is when you're under the influence of drugs and alcohol, you aren't able to make healthy decisions in your life, and you end up doing things that you normally wouldn't do because you can't control it. You don't think properly. I mean, there were studies done. People were questioned when they were under the influence of alcohol. It was down to 30% of people using protection when they had sex, as opposed to when they weren't under the influence, they were up to over 70%, where people said, yes, I do use protection. So that's a 40% decline just under the influence of drugs and alcohol, people not using protection when they're having sex. So, again, you're under the influence of alcohol, you're under the influence of drugs, you end up doing things that you normally wouldn't do. And then you have that remorse the next day, like, oh, what did I do? My mother caught on about, I would say 14 or 15, she knew that I was really heavily involved in smoking marijuana. I really enjoyed smoking marijuana. And again, I guess as it is viewed today, my mother wasn't as concerned with the marijuana and the alcohol. She was concerned that they were going to lead me to heavier drugs. So she really didn't catch on until I was about 17 that I was involved in injectable drug use when I overdosed and almost died in her house. That's when I believe my mother got a clear picture of exactly how big of a problem drugs had become for me.
Me and my mom, we talk about anything. And I always felt that I could talk to my mom. But me, personally, I was just the type of person who, that keeps stuff in. Like real serious stuff. My mom, she was a real good mother because, if I would have had the courage to come up to her and talk to her about certain things, I believe she would have helped me out and kept me from going on the path that I'm on now.
I don't think my mother had a clue that my drug usage and drug abuse was was so terrible and so heavy. I don't know if I don't believe she was in denial. I just really think that I hid it very well because I was a good student. You know, parents have these things where, well, maybe if my kid's not going to school, or maybe if my kid's not having good grades or whatever. I was one of those children, you know, one of those kids that I kept going to school. I mean, I missed a lot of days, but I kept my grades up, and I had this facade of that everything was okay. And you know, my life didn't come crashing down around me until I almost died, like I said, of a drug overdose. Well, I would just make sure that whatever I was supposed to do, I did pretty much. You know, I didn't stay out. I mean, I would sneak out, but my mother wouldn't know it. I was just really, I got really good at being sneaky. And then I was hiding the needle marks by doing it like where I wore my watch. I would use a vein where I made sure that things could hide it. Clothing, jewelry, so things like that. So I would hide my track marks, and just, you know, was very good at hiding it and still looking good. That it's not who you are that gets you HIV or drug and alcohol addicted, it's what you do. Because so many people think that it's who I am. Well, I'm from here, I'm this, I'm cool, I'm that, and it's what you do. It's not who you are that keeps you safe. You know, I used to think that, you know, because I didn't live over in that side of the town or because of the color of my skin that I was safe. You know, but it's really I didn't realize that it's what you do. And I just think it's really important that parents continue to have the dialogue with children about drugs and alcohol and the consequences, and talking about postponing sex instead of like abstain, abstain, abstain. It's really important. I think the message that's getting to kids that is working is postponing sex, getting to know your partner. I mean, how long do you think it takes to get to know someone? And then again, even if you're being responsible and you're getting to know the person, you're not sexually active, as soon as you picked up that drugs and alcohol, all that responsibility goes out the window. And it's just really important for people to remember that, I mean, it's not who you are, it's what you do that gets you HIV positive, that gets you drug and alcohol addicted, and that, that parents really need to talk to their kids. You know, because if it doesn't start at home, where's it going to start?
Young person out there that believes that this is not going to happen to them, they really need an opportunity to talk to someone who believed the same thing. And I think that one of the wonderful things about having Diana around has been that she has not been shy about communicating the fact that she felt like she was going to live forever, and like she was not vulnerable to anything that might harm her.
Example, your modeling, your behavior has inspired many people, more than you know. You are just one of those bright stars that never stop shining.
And there's something about Diana, I've always said this, I'm not really sure what it is, but she's an individual where a lot of people are able to connect with and click. She's a very down-to-earth, a very real person. For those reasons, she's been able to help us get people through the door to be tested for HIV. And what I've always said is that it's very important for people to realize or to know what their HIV status is, whether it's positive or negative. It's very important for people to be tested. When we know someone is engaging in such behaviors, that we pull them aside and say to them, hey, you know, do you realize that what you're doing could lead you to become HIV positive? Because when someone has this particular disease, there is no cure. Realizing that she only has so much time available to her because she has this disease that at some point is going to kill her.
This card I received from Melissa Hefner. I met her, I was at her high school speaking, I realized that at least that one person, at least when I was in that class, at least Melissa heard me. And maybe I made a difference for her in her life, so that she never has to live the way I live and suffer the way I suffer a lot.
Hello, my name is Melissa Hefner. Diana came to the school to talk about HIV. You should really pay attention because it can happen to anybody and it can happen to you. Diana, thank you very much for coming to the auditorium. I learned a lot from you.
Thanks, Diana.